Okay. So apparently YouTube changed things overnight. You used to be able to just click start streaming in OBS, but apparently now you have to click start streaming in OBS and then click start streaming in YouTube. Which is just the dumbest goddamn thing in the whole wide world. Wow. I've been streaming for the last 15 minutes. Wow, YouTube, you just... Oh, man. Man, YouTube really makes it hard to do anything. Welcome to the worst stream ever. It sure would be nice if, like, YouTube told you stuff like this so that, you know, you don't stream for 15 minutes to no one. Give me a minute, guys. I'm very, very angry right now. I need to kind of collect myself.
Yeah, I think I hit on like the second one, so even if I had worked up to it, I wouldn't even have been... You take a rest. This pitch forward shit.
Alright. Enough of that. Oh, now it's all... Now the stream's all fucked up. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Great. Awesome, YouTube. That's great. That is great. That makes me very happy. There's no drop frames, there's no nothing. Thank God this is a Patreon-only stream. Not Patreon-only, whatever. Patreon stream. I don't know. I guess there's nothing I can do about it. I guess YouTube is just a steaming pile of shit as always. Alright, let's just get into the goddamn spreadsheet. Spreadsheet. Great. Google Docs. You guys are saying it looks good, okay. That makes me feel a little bit better. It's not Google Docs, it's Google Sheets. Oh, wow, this is not the way I expected for it to go, but you know, I guess it's just the way it is sometimes. Here's the document. I did a little bit more work on it. So basically what I'm working on here... Jesus Christ, Google, are you fucking kidding me? Will you stop deleting shit? God damn it. Just at total fucking random, it just deletes shit. It just fucking delete... So what I'm working on is essentially a way of mapping out... Alright, so... So what we're talking about here is response time, alright? And response time is based mainly off of the width of the motor. The reason being because the width of the motor is what creates mechanical torque. And mechanical torque allows the motor to speed up and slow down the propeller more quickly or more slowly. The stator height does affect that, but in my experience, not as much as the stator width. So we're focusing on stator width. It did it again. God, what the? Why? Like, why does it just delete shit? I need you to not delete shit. Jesus Christ. What? Like, what? So what I'm and so I have all of this sort of knowledge in my brain, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get it onto paper so that I can put it onto the Patreon page and encourage even more of you to join, to keep the lights on in this motherfucker. So yeah, what we're talking about here is you've got a rotating assembly here, and the rotating assembly is the weight of the prop nut, the weight of the prop itself, and the weight of the motor bell. The simplest way that I can do this is just to specify the motor width so that we can figure out what an ideal prop weight is for the motor width. M5 nut versus T-mount doesn't really make much of a difference. It's only like a 0.2 gram difference, which it's something, but it's not that drastic that we need to break this out as M5 with a whole separate thing with M5 and T-mount. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to give you guys a simple baseline so that when you have a motor that's a motor with an 8mm wide stator, there's an ideal propeller weight for really good freestyle performance. And you could also say cinematic performance, because the whole point for me of a good flight. So now the chat is completely dead. There's been like nothing in the chat for like 5 minutes. So now I wonder if everything's broken again. Or maybe there's just nobody in here because the stream started 20 minutes late and now I'm just screaming and yelling the whole time. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do with this spreadsheet. Okay, there's some people typing. Thanks, guys. So in order to do that, so does that all make sense? The moving your PIDs up and down can affect this, but having a good mechanical system is the most important thing. You can't have a poorly spec'd out mechanical system and then cover it up with the PID loop. It just doesn't work like that. You can improve it like maybe 10% by doing it that way, but I would rather have something, yeah, 10% is not good enough. So, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here. And here's where I'm at so far. So, what we did, I want to say 2 weeks ago, is I took my TrueRC coffee mug of one of every micro propeller, and shout out to TrueRC for sending this coffee mug over around Christmas time when I placed an order with them. Yeah, so I weighed one of every of those propellers and we mapped them out here. So I've got a ton of different propeller weights, which basically I needed to do that to kind of wrap my head around what 3-inch props typically weigh, just to kind of get myself a little bit more in the ballpark, because like in my head I have combinations that have worked well in the past. So like I've built alright, so this ripsqueak, for example, right? This ripsqueak is on RCX 1306s and Emax Avan 3-inch props. So like in my head, I just know that RCX 1306s are about as small as you can go for really good response time and really good PID loop performance and really good freestyle performance with this particular propeller. In my head, I also know that when you go from this propeller over to the Gemfan Winddancer 3028, which is a little bit heavier, this motor doesn't have quite enough stator width to really control that slightly heavier prop. So then, hey buddy, you come in to console me? You want to say hi to chat? Oh, buddy. So yeah. So now that I have this, so now that I've weighed these propellers out, I can see that the Emax Avan 3-inch prop, hello, is 1.2 grams, but the Gemfan 38 is 1.4 grams. So I can just sort of start to wrap my head around, and what I'm basically trying to do here is just give you guys stator width, 8 millimeters, 11 millimeters, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 20, 22, 23. and then another column of ideal prop weight. 0.175 to 0.325, 0.325 to 0.575, 1.2, 1.4, 1.9, 3.1, 3.6. Write down the list there, right? So that if you decide, well, so there's a couple things going on there, right? So it's going to help you guys, like if you have a set of motors that's got that have a 13 millimeter wide stator, right? It's going to give you an ideal propeller weight, and propellers are a lot cheaper to buy. So you can buy a couple different propellers, or just look at my list of propeller weights, and figure out what prop is going to work best on that motor. The stator height of the motor is basically personal preference, in that you get to pick the total amount of horsepower that motor is going to have. The stator height, as I said before, does have a little bit to do with all of this, but not nearly as much as the stator width. The stator width does a much better job at increasing or decreasing the response time. The stator height really allows you to pick how much power you have at full throttle. The stator height you can think of like a single turbo Supra. It takes a while to come on to boost. It sits down in boost threshold or boost lag, as most people know it, but it's actually boost threshold. And then it winds up in the same way that on the throttle, as we push the throttle up more and more and more, a taller stator motor will just continue to wind up more and more and more and make more power. So that's like a 6 or a 7 or an 8 millimeter tall stator. That's how those are going to feel. A 3 millimeter or 4 millimeter tall stator, they're going to have a much more linear power curve. It's not going to be as peaky of a power curve. And on the really flat motors, there's actually going to be a point where it almost stops making more power. Like, it at least feels like that. It obviously does make more and more power, but it feels like you get to a certain point in the throttle and it just doesn't make any more power. Mainly because typically when you feel that way, it's because you're used to a taller stator motor, which a lot of you micro folks are, because there aren't many micro motors that are. They've been building micro motors wrong for a long time. They've been doing it because they've been trying to keep the weight down, but keeping the weight down sacrificed flight performance, and that's stupid. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do here. So some of this stuff is I'm having to kind of even guess at some of this stuff, because I've never flown. Well, I guess I have. I have flown a 16 millimeter wide stator. You need a hand?
No, but hold on.
The hell's that? Hold on. There's a big ass box. Heavy?
No, very light.
This is at the door?
This is at the front door, yeah.
What the hell is this?
It's an Amazon box.
Hold on. This is more important than this spreadsheet. Really good question from Esk Race. Doesn't the size of the bearing matter in that calculation, though? It does not, Esk. It has, believe it or not, it has absolutely nothing to do with this. The size of the bearing only has to do with the durability of the motor. The bigger the bearing, the bigger the balls. The bigger the bearing, the bigger the ball bearings in there. This is Kristen's birthday present. I had a feeling. Bigger ball bearings will spin slower, which is actually more efficient. But it's also, it's something that needs to be assembled. Well, wait, no, I can show you guys. Hold on. Let's see. Your orders. You're not looking, are you? That. Long story. Yeah, so the ball, a bigger bearing. Here's the thing about bearings, though, right? Like, there's an outer race and then there's an inner race. If you increase the size of the outer race, but you don't increase the size of the inner race, the ball bearings will get bigger, they will spin slower, and they will be more durable. If you increase the size of the outer race and the inner race, that actually won't happen, right? As long as you're increasing them at the same rate. But what will happen if you increase this, I just showed it, Patrick. What will happen if you show if you increase the outer race and increase the inner race is that the motor shaft will be able to be bigger and it'll be stronger, and that's really important. But yeah, in the size of the bearing has nothing to do with anything that we've been talking about so far. Patrick FPV says Kebab's 2203 felt like they go flat on the top end. Exactly, Patrick. Exactly it. That is exactly the feeling that I'm talking about from a shorter stator motor. Very similar if you guys are into cars, with a like a supercharged or like a big displacement V8. When you look at the dyno chart of a single turbo Supra, it sits down low in boost threshold, and then once the full system starts spooling together, it rockets upwards, and it rockets upwards all the way to redline at 9 or 10,000 RPM, and then that's the end of your dyno pull. Whereas a big displacement V8 or a supercharged engine of any sort will have a much the power curve will not be as spiky, and it won't be as peaky, and it'll just kind of do this, and typically it'll even fall off towards the top. It won't fall off, it'll just kind of flatten out towards the top. And it's not a great analogy because those things are happening because of completely different reasons, but if we could get a dyno chart for our motors, it would show that same thing, a flat motor versus a tall motor. So yeah, and response time happens everywhere. See, and that's where things are kind of a little bit different here, is that response time needs to be measured at 0 throttle, but it's also measured at full throttle. Most tuning problems actually happen at 0 throttle, right? You do a big throttle blip, you jump off the throttle to 0, and the rig wobbles. That's because at 0 throttle, your motor is not wide enough to speed up and slow down the propeller to prevent that wobbling from happening, as just one example. In prop wash, typically you snap the rig around, or you're coming down into like a split S or something like that, and you're either on 0 throttle or just into the throttle a little bit. So the stator width is really, really, really important, much more so than the stator height, because again, the stator height is mainly going to be adding power up towards the top of the throttle, whereas stator width is adding power everywhere, in the same way that displacement versus forced induction. Not technically in the same way, but practically, like in the real world, in a similar fashion, right? So yeah, let me dive back into this. So thus far, where I'm at is that so this 8mm stator width, this is basically an 0802. We do have 0803s, and there are even 0804s, but they really don't make much sense. And again, the stator width is the big one. So we're mainly basing this on 0802. So 8mm stator width, ideal prop weight 0.175 to 0.325, and where I pulled that from is the weight of, so on my tiny 0802 Tiny Whoops, the Gem Fan 1224 blade, which is 0.3, feels absolutely fine, and you get really good PID loop performance. I go all the way down to 0.175 here for the Venom biblade, just because that's the lightest. That's just the lightest of the propeller options, and to some extent, you kind of can't have too much stator width. Although that's not really true at all, because if you have too much stator width, then the motor is too big and it's too heavy, and there's really no reason to kind of carry that much motor weight around. So technically what I should do here is add another stator width for 7mm. There are 0703s. I just haven't flown any of those. And I really like to only base shit like this off of what I've personally flown, personally experienced. I'm tempted to not have this ideal prop weight down so low. I'm tempted to say, like... But no, I have flown those Venom props on the 0802s, and they do fly great. It's kind of a waste, like we just talked about, but it is totally fine. So I am actually going to leave it there. So then we've got 11mm. So we're talking about 1102s, 1103s, 1104s. So we're looking at 0.325 because that's where this kind of leaves off. We don't really have any... I think there's like one 10mm wide stator motor that's out there, but I don't think you can get it inside the US, and I've never flown it, so again, I'm just going to ignore it, basically. Realistically, our next stator width is 11, so we're going to pick up right where we left off, at 0.325, because again, you're always safer to have too much stator width, and then you'll get a really good PID loop performance, but you'll be dragging around a little bit extra weight for no reason. And then the max, I'm saying, is 575. So that is the weight of a Gemfan 1636, which is a 75mm tiny whoop. So we also got to be careful here. When I say 75mm tiny whoop, I'm talking about motor to motor. They classify tiny whoops as 65s and 75s, and that is a measure of motor to motor distance. That is not a measure of the diameter of the propeller. So just keep... Oh my god, it just fucking deleted it. It just... I swear to fucking Christ. That should be right, because I think it was the max there. So, yeah. I have flown 1102, my Cockroach 75 build is on... That was my bad. Oh, wait, no. We're good. Yeah, is on the Gemfan 1636 4-blade propellers, and it's absolutely fantastic. 12mm. This is where I need to start working a little bit here. So, now we're up into 2-inch propellers. And... So... Now I gotta just kind of think about what I have flown on 12mm wide stator motors. So there's a Gemfan 4-blade. Where the hell is it? I gotta zoom out a little bit. There's a Gemfan 4-blade in here somewhere. Is it this? There it is. Gemfan D51. That's the one. That's my batteries that are charging. So the Gemfan D51 is Gemfan's Cinewoop propeller, and it just deleted it. And it doesn't... You can't undo. It doesn't let you undo. Yeah, it does. It just let me undo. Okay. You gotta click out of this. I'm gonna burn this goddamn building to the ground. Okay, so Gemfan D51 is 0.8 of a gram. That is a hell of a jump. I'm actually pretty surprised that a 12. So my like test bed or whatever for a 12mm wide motor is this guy, the Beta 85. And I've got this guy on Talon 1204 8400 kV motors on those Gemfan D51s. And realistically, like, the performance of this is good. I did have to turn the PIDs up a little bit. I feel like 0.8 is like absolute max for a 12 millimeter wide propeller. So let me, and I'm gonna sort of double back on all this stuff and like make sure that, because as we go up a millimeter at a time on the stator width, like the ideal prop weight should go up pretty, you know what I mean? Like it should be kind of one of these things. So I'm gonna kind of go forward and backward to make sure that all this is kind of lining up the way that it logically should. So for the 12 millimeter wide stator, the max is going to be 0.8. The minimum, let's just say 0.575 again, because that's where we're leaving off on the 11. You know what I'm saying? So now we're going to go up to 13 millimeter, and 13 millimeter wide motors. Oh, for Christ's sakes! My sort of test bed there is the RCX 1304s, which I've been running forever, on a million different combos. I guess I put them away. I don't have any handy. I also can't see the chat, so I'm gonna check the chat in a couple of minutes here. Let me just get through as much of this as I can here. So 13 millimeter wide stator, we're gonna start at 0.8, and now I want to take a look at some 2.5 inch props. The RCX 1304s really shine on a 2.5 inch propeller like the Emax Avan Rush and the, well, let's just take a look. Scroll down a little bit here into the 2.5 millimeter props. So, all right. So Gemfan 2540, it was great on those. They're a little bit more pitchy than I want, but they're 1 gram per propeller, right? The Racer Star 2435s, these are interesting because they're a quad blade. I think they're the only quad blade in here. But the blades themselves are very, very thin, so it's actually a little bit lighter. It's an interesting prop. Because of the fact that it's a quad blade, it's a little bit more draggy, but it's nice and light, which is interesting. Here's the Azure 2540, which is not balanced right out of the bag, so it's kind of worthless. These HQ 2.5 by 2.5 by 3s are also good, but not super well balanced. And here's the Emax Avan Rush, which is 1.4 grams. And what other 2.5 millimeter props do we have? Rotor X 2535, okay. Okay, so I think I'm gonna max this one out at 1.4. So let me just get that knocked out. 0.8 to, what did I say, 1.4? Let's see what happens when we go down to the 14 millimeter wide stator here. So the 14 millimeter wide stator, we're gonna, just in theory here, we're gonna start it off at 1.4. So 14 millimeter wide stators can handle 3-inch propellers in terms of PID loop performance. The 1404 doesn't really make enough like raw horsepower at the top of the throttle, in my opinion, for a 3-inch propeller. This is where the stator height does affect the stator width a little bit, but we're just talking about PID performance. And yeah, the 14 millimeter wide stators do have quick enough response time to give you decent PID performance and decent response times. But I'm going to keep it on the lighter side of the 3-inch propeller. So let's take a look at some of the 3-inch propellers here. Scroll up a little bit. So the Emax Avan 3-inch is one of the lighter 3-inch propellers at 1.2. Jesus, that's lighter than that. What? That would explain a lot. I didn't even realize that. I didn't even realize that the 3-inch AVAN weighs 0.2 of a gram less than the 2.5-inch AVAN. That's kind of nutty. I should maybe build a little bit more overlap. I should maybe be great. I should maybe not. No, I'm not going to build in an overlap because this is just like ideal. You can go above or below the ideal prop weight and still get okay perform. God damn it! Why does it keep fucking deleting stuff? Why is everything out to get me? Like, why is it that everything I do on a computer fucks with me in some way or another? Like, why can't I do one thing on a computer that's not a complete fucking nightmare? Anybody know the answer to that? Emax AVAN 3-inch. Okay, so now let's take a look at the GemFan 3028. That's 1.4, so now we're talking. 14 millimeter wide propeller. You know, I am actually going to build in a little overlap here. I'm going to drop this down to 1.2. And let's see how high we're going to go. So 14, I actually haven't run many 14 millimeter wide propellers. So, you know what we're going to do is we're going to skip the 14 and we're going to come back to it. Let's hit the 15 here. So the 15 millimeter wide motor, that's the Brother Hobby 1504.5 is my test bed for that. So let's say 1.4 as the starting point there. And let me see and kind of think about which other propellers I've run on these Brother Hobby motors. Let's see what the heaviest. I've definitely run these HQ 3x3x3s, and they're 1.5, so that's interesting. This is a quad blade here, HQ 3.1x3x4. I'm trying to think if I've run those on these motors. I'm also doing this so that I can have some like testing lined up to kind of further refine this. And make sure that this is locked in. Let me keep going down the list here. So we're talking about, I'm looking for the heavier propellers basically. There's the GemFan D75x5. That's 3.1 grams though. I mean, that's totally off the reservation. Here's the HQ 5 blade. I haven't run that. iFlight 34. These are all the Cinewoop propellers down here. Here we go, T-Motor 3140, now we're talking. So the T-Motor 3140, I've run that on 16 and 18 millimeter wide propellers, and it's felt really good. So that's 1.9 grams. I'll betcha that's a little heavy for the 15 millimeter wide propeller. So for the 15 millimeter wide, just for now, let me set that at 1.8 because that's a little bit less than the T-Motor 3140. I now have to retype in 16 millimeters because Google is a big fat sack of shit. So for a 16 millimeter wide propeller, let's go 1.8 up to, so the, so we talked about, where is it, 1.9? Where the hell did it go? T-Motor 3140 is 1.9. And then, so what else have I run on those 1606s? That's maybe a little bit heavier. Not these, not that. Not that either. Let's just say 2 for the time being. Let's just go with 2. And now let's jump down to 18 millimeter wide. Now we're into the world of the X-Nova 1804s. Let me actually pause at this point and see if I can get caught up on the chat a little bit. Mike Bergman with a $10 super chat. Dude, thank you, brother. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He says, listening to your Rollins interview, dude, you spoke really well. Thank you for the honesty and staying dedicated to helping others in FPV and life. Stoked to see the growth over the last year. I didn't even realize that it was going up. I thought he was putting it up tomorrow. Let me jump in. I guess that makes sense. He asked me earlier to send him a picture for the thumbnail. Wait, no, not my channel. I'm so used to going to my channel. I can't do that. There we go. All right, cool. Here comes a link. Oh. I bet you Mike is a patron of Michael Rollins, and he's watching it early on Patreon. That's going to be my guess, because it doesn't look like it's up here yet. I think it's going up tomorrow at noon for normies. Sorry, guys. Clicked the wrong scene. Wow, this is one of the most technical, fucked up streams I've had in a long time. So there you go. Now I'm a patron of Mr. Rollins, and then it shows you all the stuff that they've typed in here, and you click Get Started, and yeah, cool things happen. So there you go. If you want early access to our live stream, oh cool, he put up the audio only of it. Very cool. So yeah, if you want early access, you can join Michael's stream, or just Patreon rather, or just wait until tomorrow and it'll be up on his YouTube. But you should join his stream. You got $3, right? It's $3 a month, and it'll mean a lot to him. Go do it, or else I'll kill you. What do you write here? Mental illnesses, making it, actually talk about experiences with mental health and the ways we cope. We gotta talk about the good sides of mental health and told that our mental illness takes and lives around us, spreading a lighthearted, fun episode that I think you're gonna enjoy. Very cool. And look, he dropped a whole bunch of my links. That is super awesome. Yeah, go join Michael's Patreon, or I'll beat you with a hammer. You get to pick. How can I get you guys a link to this? Hold on. I mean, I definitely don't want to be beat with a hammer, so, you know, I joined his Patreon. It's up to you. Maybe I don't know where you live, so it'll make it harder, but I'll find out. There you guys go. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, I want to get caught up in the chat. Okay, cool. Want to get caught up in the chat. Scrolling up. Chomper says, I don't know what the hell those prototype props you sent me. I try to set, damn, they're light. Remind me of the T-Motor 5143S. prototype props, Chomper? Are they clear? Are they clear gem fan props? If so, I actually don't know what they are either. My guess is they're 5140s. I think those are the prototypes for the 5143-3s. But don't quote me on that. Those came from Joshua Bardwell. He gave me a huge box of props that he was going to throw away. Remy Tim says, I think what Esk is implying is that if it's a wider bearing, there's less iron in the stator to be magnetized. And to your second statement, yes, but that never happens. So that's a really good thought. Let's talk about the way that the stator works, right? And think about the stator from a mechanical torque standpoint, right? So if you increase the size of the bearing, it's going to eat into a little bit of the stator. Oh, for God's sakes! If you increase the outer race diameter of the bearing, it's going to eat into a little bit of the stator pole on the very inside here, right? But the very inside of the stator pole does very little work. The outside of the stator pole, specifically the flat part all the way on the outside, which, if you can see, they increase the width. I swear to God, I'm going to burn Logitech's building to the goddamn ground. There is so much contrast for this to lock focus on, and it just refuses. Yeah, well, the stream is just going to be shitty because Logitech is a dumpster fire of a company that can go to hell forever. So, yeah, technically speaking, increasing the size of the bearing will eat a little bit of the stator pole, but it will only eat the part of the stator pole that does the least amount of work. The outside of the stator pole is where the majority of the work is done. And so, yeah. That's a really good thought, though, Esk. And it is true. Like, what you're saying is true. But it's pretty rare that we have, like, 99% of motors use the exact same sized bearing. So, you know, this chart is based on the 99%. And I've actually not flown any of the motor. So with micromotors, it pretty much never happens. There's like a couple 23, 24, 25 millimeter wide stator motors that do that. And those aren't even really on the chart. This chart is maxing out at 23 millimeters wide. So we don't really need to die. And I have no experience with those motors. I've never gotten my hands on a set of those motors. But that's a really good thought. Weirder with the Skateboard says, it's official, the stupid drone works. Nice. Michael Blade says, hello. Frank Nicholas says, you get what you pay for, Google crap. Mike Bergman, I agree. I'm not going to say it out loud, though. Remy Tim says, is it your OBS hotkeys? It's trying to type something into the box. Oh. Let's see. Man, that's funny because no, it's not only that though. Yeah, it is. I'm trying to think if it was deleting stuff. Whatever. I'm sure that's what it is. Dauntless says, any clue why a toothpick wouldn't get second confirmation beeps from the ESC and have no OSD but still video? The AIO blew up, brother. With an AIO, well, no, I guess if you have an inconsistency between the version of the firmware on the ESC versus the RPM filtering on versus off, in beta flight, that could do it. But that happens a lot on AIOs when the ESCs fail, which is why my brain went directly into that. But like, if you fly a battery and then you plug in another battery and it's doing that, the AIO blew up. Remy Tim says it might be up on his Patreon. Right, there's where I hit the wrong scene and the audio went to the desktop instead of the mic. And Mike Bergman says, sorry about that, man. Just signed backup on your Patreon too. Rock on, brother. Nice, Mike. Don't apologize. You actually reminded me. I wanted to join Michael's Patreon when we were talking the other night at the end of the interview, but then we ended up talking outside of the interview for like another 2 hours, and I just totally forgot. Because at the end of the interview, the two of us go, hey, join. I start going, everybody join Michael's Patreon, and he's going, everybody join Ciotti's Patreon, it's better than mine. And then I go, everybody join Michael's Patreon, it's better than mine. But then we talked for 2 hours, and I totally forgot. Mike Bergman stays for the death threats. All right, scrolling down. Orga A says, just started flying. How can I tell how much of my failures are due to really bad PID tuning and how much is really crappy piloting? Orga, this is probably not the answer that you want, but pretty much 100% of it is piloting. The PID tune will never make you not crash. A crappy PID tune will make your footage not look great, but it'll never make you not crash, unfortunately. I know that sucks, and I know some of you guys are pissed off right now at hearing that, but that's just the truth. You can give me a rig with the worst PID tune in the world, and I will fly around that PID tune and still give you some footage that looks decent, but B, I won't crash any more than I normally do, which, you know, it helps that I crash a lot. But yeah, a bad PID tune, it just won't make you crash. My PID tune is very latent. There's a big delay to really smooth things out. So my really good PID tune technically is worse than like a stock PID tune or a really bad PID tune, because they typically have a bunch more feed forward in them than my tune, and they definitely have the set point at 0 rather than at 1. And yeah, like crashing is based on a lack of reaction time or getting confused typically, right? Especially if you're new, right? Like when you're new, your ability to like always know where up is and where down is the biggest issue, and that's when like you get these moments where like you're in the goggles and you have that moment of like confusion of like and that's also what ends, like every single time you hit the ground and you're on the throttle, that's that, right? Like at some point you'll develop this like innate sense where you always know what's up and what's down, regardless of the weird orientation that you're putting the rig in, or maybe you're flying backwards or sideways, or like you're doing a snap spin or something like that where you can't quite make out how quickly everything is rotating in the goggles. So yeah, unfortunately it's you, not the PID tune. Sorry. I guess you could maybe argue that a good PID tune will make you a little bit more confident. But a bad PID tune will actually make you work harder as a pilot, and it will actually make you a better pilot faster, because you will have to learn how to fly around prop wash and throttle chop bobbles and all these other bad behaviors, bounce back, that a proper PID tune will fix, as long as you're on beta flight. Dauntless says, the AIO has a working 5-volt regulator and only one LED shows up on the flight controller. How would I kill all 4 ESCs in one crash? You probably wouldn't, but something about the connection between the ESCs and the flight controller is more than likely what failed. So it sounds like this happened after a crash. That AIO is dead. That is what AIOs do. You get into crashes, and they die. That is one of the many things that I hate about AIOs, and I sincerely hope that they die a fast death. I don't think they will. I think that they'll die a slow death once people finally realize that the flight performance sucks on AIOs compared to 20x20 stacks, and that that they're no easier to build, and that they're way more expensive when they fail because you have to replace everything, and that all the things that we've been talking about lately. Athix says, if you can't keep it in the air, I don't think you can feel a bad tune. That's a really good point, Athix. And again, Orga, like, this is not us bagging on you, like, at all, man. Like, I was exactly where... I was worse than you at one point. Everybody in this chat was worse than you at one point, right? They just kept their head down and kept pouring it on and just kept flying more and more and more, and that is the only way to get better. So this is by no means us bagging on you, dude. Like, we've all been exactly where you're at. Just because we've been into this hobby longer doesn't make us any better than you, right? But what Athix said is very, very true. Like, the understanding of what a good and what a bad tune are, it takes a long time. I made the mistake of diving into PID tuning way too early. Way, 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 way too early. And I made all the mistakes. I blamed the tune for the crashes. I blamed the tune for, I mean, everything. It was the perfect scapegoat. And the positive side of that is that it drove me and encouraged me to learn tuning really early on. And that's why I have such a good feel for tuning, because I've been doing it from, like, the get-go. And in my defense, back then, micros were, like, the PID tunes that came on micros were abysmal. And there was a lot of gains to be had with a proper tune. And I took this stock Baby Hawk and just threw everything at it. A carbon frame, a different camera mount, 3-inch propellers instead of 2.3-inch propellers, 3S instead of 2S, like all these different things, right? So I kind of also had to dive into tuning very early on, but I wish I hadn't, because I wasted a lot of time tuning when I should have just been pouring batteries in and just flying and flying and flying and flying and flying, so that my ability to understand what the hell the tune was doing would have gotten better quicker, and then that would have helped me figure out tuning. Because for a long time, for probably like my first year, I would make changes to the tune, and then I would go fly the rig, and I wouldn't feel what had changed, but then I would convince myself, because something definitely changed, right? I definitely changed the number and hit save. I would convince myself that this, that, or the other thing had changed. And more often than not, that was wrong. And then I would go back and I would change it again, and it would start this horrible feedback loop of incorrect data, right? And that was all coming from up here. It's why I talk about placebo and confirmation bias so much, because it runs rampant with difficult activities, right? This is something that I dealt with in autocross and track day instruction all the time. You go and you make a tire pressure, like a new person drops their tire pressures down way too low, to the point where the sidewall can't stand up and it's rolling out of the grip, and they say, oh yeah, I ran faster, or it felt better. It's like, no, it didn't. I can see the scuffing halfway down the sidewall. Tires don't work that way. The sidewall of the tire doesn't have grip. The tread block does, right? So it's like any activities that have like a lot of these kind of technical things, but also have a big component of performance, right? Where like it's difficult, right? And you have to like do it over and over and over and over and over again to get better at it. This happens. So yeah. you just got to be patient, Orga. You just got to be patient. Leave the tune alone. Here's the best thing for you right now in terms of tuning. Make sure the motors aren't getting hot, and that's it. Like, as long as your motors aren't getting hot, just fly your ass off, man. Spend all of your time and all of your effort just flying as many batteries as you can. Buy as many batteries as you can. Build a second rig that's completely identical so that you can fly the same thing over and over again, and so that you can part share between the two rigs. Just do everything that we talk about on here a lot to just stay up in the air as much as possible, and just remember, just patience, patience, patience. Just be patient. Just put the time into this. In motorsports, we call it the nut behind the wheel. Tighten the nut behind the wheel, and the wheel means the steering wheel. That's what you're gonna do. You're gonna tighten the nut behind the wheel as tight as you possibly can, and then at some point, tuning is gonna start to make sense, because you're gonna start to notice the bad behaviors more, because you're gonna figure out how to fly around them. And that is when you can start tuning, because at that point you're learning the right thing, which is how to fly around them, which you need to know anyway. And then when you tune on top of that, you never get prop wash again. Not never, but you know what I'm saying. So you just got to be patient, brother. I know that it's not the answer that you want to hear, right? But it's the answer that I need to give you. It's the answer that I wish somebody had given me 4 years ago, because I would be way better as a pilot today, sitting here, if I hadn't wasted so much time after every battery walking back into the house, plugging the goddamn, because we didn't have OSD back then, plugging the damn thing into the computer, getting into beta flight, looking at the settings and going, all right, well, what the hell did I just change? Okay, so let me think about this. Okay, so let me change this, and I'll change it, and then I'll change this. Okay, all right, great. Unplug another battery, walk back out on the goddamn porch. Okay, let me fly another battery. Pour batteries on the fire. That's what you want to do. That's how to be a better pilot. That's the right way to get started in this hobby. Learn from somebody that didn't do it the right way. Orga says, thank you. It's actually the answer I was hoping to get. Nice. It's better to practice than to deal with technical settings stuff. You're a bunch of steps ahead of me, Orga, because that is not the answer that I wanted to get 4 years ago. I wanted to blame it on the tune. I wanted to blame it on anything but myself, right? Like, it's a slippery slope, blaming shit on yourself. Like, it can get very toxic, but you can't be all the way over here, right? You can't just blame everything else. You can't just blame everything on yourself. You got to find that sort of balance in the middle, and it sounds like you've already found that way better than I have. It's something I struggle with in every part of my life. Four Eyes FPV says, what would be the cause of my Mockingbird to take off nicely then suddenly fall out of the flight? Could be a lot of things, Four Eyes. When it does it do it with all of your batteries? Does it do it with a brand new battery? Like, are all of your batteries shot, maybe, and it's doing something called browning out? Also, when it falls out of the sky, you need to figure out if it's if the whole thing is just shutting off, right? So, like, are you flying along and the whole thing just falls out of the sky, like, relatively evenly, so that your view is solid? Or when it falls out of the sky, does it drop an arm? And if it drops an arm, is it dropping the same arm? In this case, it's the right front, motor number 2, right? Is it dropping the right front every single time? So what you might need to do is record with your goggles, the DVR, and watch it back, because it's hard to see it when in the moment. Like, in the moment that your rig falls out of the sky, it's just like, ah! And you're trying to fly, right? So, like, there's a lot going on. When you watch the DVR back, a lot of times you can tell by, like, the direction of the streaks, you know, because, like, when it starts tumbling, like, the whole world turns into streaks. So those are the couple of things that you need to get your troubleshoot started there. If you know those answers, let me know and we'll keep going. FPV Trucker says, trying to set up a new 3-inch build with... I've never heard of that before. Hyphen RC stack. F7 45 amp. Jesus. ESC iFlight 1408 3600s. When in the motor tab in Betaflight, the motors twitch when I move the slider up. FPV Trucker, it sounds like either your ESC is not flashed for RPM filtering, or it is, and then on the Betaflight side, you're not set up, or you are, right? It sounds like there's an inconsistency between RPM filtering on or off in Betaflight and the version of the firmware on your ESC. So check that. The other thing it could be is if you're on D-Shot 600, go down to D-Shot 300. If your PID loop is at 8K, go down to 4K. Do these things all one at a time. Don't do them all at once because you need to target where this problem is. And then the other thing that it could be is that you might have changed the target of the ESC. In BL Heli, there's when you go to flash an ESC, there's target, which you never want to touch, and it should have text that tells you that. And then there's version. Version is the only thing that you ever want to change in BL Heli. FPV Trucker says it's not 32-bit ESC. That's okay. It doesn't have to be. Everything I just said is still totally valid, regardless of whether or not it's 32-bit. Or the ESC could be blown up. So there's a bunch of stuff for you to check. BH said, spot on. I flew my first 5 months without tuning, and I am caught up on chat. So let's get back into the... actually, hold on. Let me give you another quick video to watch. And I'm just going to take a moment for myself. Here's something. What the hell is this? Oh, yeah, alright, this is fine. Be right back. Sides of that dive gap were after I hit the side of that dive gap like once or twice. Actually after I hit it the first time, I was like, well, fuck it. It's just bouncing right off, right? The props are spinning and it just like kind of bumps into it. I was like, whatever, let's go for it. Finn FPV says, listening to CiottiFPV makes you want to fly better. Confirmed. Had the stream up while flying and didn't crash. Turned it off and ate shit 3 times in the same battery. Jason Crabtree says, I always keep motor diagnostic in OSD. It's only 4 dots, but instant feedback if you have motor or prop issues. I played around with that motor diagnostic thing. I got frustrated because it's not quite like, I wish it was more accurate. I wish it was number based. What do you use it for, Jason? Like, oh, to see if a motor's letting go. Okay, that's interesting. I see what you use it for. Huh. That's interesting. I never thought to use it in that way. Let's get back to the spreadsheet. I'm going to fill in as much of this as I possibly can, and then I'm going to shut this down because I want to go fly. Kristen says it's beautiful out. All right. No, that was during lockdown, which is why I was, yeah, willing to hover like that. I don't hover in front of buildings like that if there's any chance of anybody being in there, because yeah, that's the shit that gets us a bad name. But yeah, that was the day after, 2 days after the lockdown really started, and Atlanta was just empty. It was the weirdest thing was the silence. Like that was Buckhead, and it was just silent. Like there was just no noise. It was crazy. Like there was the highway there, but like just like as soon as you got away from and even the highway was like not crowded at all. It was very, very eerie, very, very weird. Interesting time to be alive. All right, so let me zoom in on this again. I'm gonna lose the, oh, Private Island says, by the way, I solved that whistling chirping motors problem from last night. Of course, it was only happening with RPM filters on. Default gyro position was off by 90 degrees. Wow. I can't believe it flew like that. That's nuts. That's crazy that it flew like that. Damn. No, it wasn't flying like that. It was just on the ground armed, wasn't it? I'm actually that should have Tasmanian Devil, dude. You got lucky. That should have went bananas. Usually when you have that wrong, the PID loop will get so confused that it'll put full power to one of the motors pretty quickly, and it'll just and try to kill all the baby children. All right, so let's do a little bit more work here on this spreadsheet, and then I will kind of sort of wrap it up and go get some flying in. It's been almost a week since I've flown, I think. Maybe not. It just feels like almost a week. Where did I leave off here? 16 millimeter. So now let's go up to 18 millimeter. This is the 1804. X Nova is my test bed for this. Those feel absolutely amazing on the T-Motor 3140, which is 1.9. We left our 16 millimeter off at 2. I feel like I need to bring this down a little bit here. Let's come down to 1.6, and then here I can go 1.8, 2. Okay. So I also flew those X Nova 1804s on some of these Cinewoop props. So let me come in here. So those were M5. Those are I have the M5 1804s. And let me see which of these Cinewoop props I put those on. I put them on the 3 blades. Where are the 3 blade Cinewoop props? What the fuck? What did it go down there for? That was not because of the keystroke, for the record. That was Google being a piece of dog shit. GemFan Ducted 75. That's the one. And it's 1.9 grams. Okay, so yeah, good. We're still in the ballpark. 1.8 to 1.9. I think I also flew them on the GemFan D76, which is in here somewhere. No, D75, there it is. And that's 3.1 grams. It was a little overloaded on that 3.1 gram propeller. So let's say 1.8 up to, let's say maybe 2.6, I think. That's probably a little bit too big of a range. Let me jump down to the 20 millimeter for a 2004, and then maybe I can back into the... I know I've done that a couple times in a row here, but like I said, we're going to have to go backwards and forwards a little bit. Because now we're getting up into motors that I don't have 4 years of experience with. I only have like maybe 6 months or maybe even less than that. So I just got to be careful. So not 24, 2.4. So now the 20 millimeter motors, the 2004s, I've also run those on 4-inch props some. So I can also bring some 4-inch propeller weights into the mix, which I don't have on this sheet yet. So let's say, what if we started at 2.4? The 2004s feel great on these Gemfan 5-blade propellers. So they are, that's 3.1. So 2.4 all the way up to like, what if we say 3.2? Man, that is a big ass range. Once I get this locked in, I'm gonna like double check everything by flying some of these combos and making sure that it's still good. I feel like this should maybe be up at 2.6, and then the 18 can maybe handle all the way up to 2.6. iFlight 3040. And I feel like I did try these iFlight 3040s, which are 2.5 on those 1804s, and they were okay. So let me leave it there. 1.8 to 2.6. Man, that is a big ass range though. What's 1.8? What's that? Where's that T-motor prop? T-motor 3140 is 1.9. Okay. Yeah, so the 3140, 1.9, of course it felt really good on the 18. Okay. So 20 millimeter, 2.6 to 3. See, I feel like this range is just too much of a range for the 18 millimeter. So let's do that. And for the 20, let's go down to 2.4. Oh, but then that becomes too big of a range. Well, I guess that makes sense because there is the 19 in between. Yeah, I guess it makes sense because we're going from single millimeter increases to double to 2 millimeter increases. So this actually makes sense that we're going to start to see gaps in between these. So let me leave that there. What's 3.2 again? 3.2 is a little bit heavier than the Gemfan 5-blade. Okay, so then we get into 22 millimeter wide, which is Kebab's 2203, 2204. So now we're talking, I mean, we can start it off at 3.2, and then his motors are beefy enough to really turn these big, heavy guys. But I think that's about as heavy as we're gonna go. Yeah, and like, so 22 millimeter, that brings us all the way to like 2206, 2207, 2208, and those can turn a pretty big ass propeller, you know what I mean? So we can kind of probably bump this all the way up to 4.0, and then 23 millimeters wide, start it down at 3.6 for sure, because that's what the S3s weigh, is 3.6. And then these realistically can go all the way up to like 4.2 and probably a little bit beyond. So that's actually looking pretty good. 14 millimeter. Let's see if we can kind of dial this in a little bit though. 14 millimeter. See, I don't have much experience with 14 millimeter wide motors. I skipped right from 13 all the way up to 15. So let's just put the 14 millimeter right in between and say 1.6. And then we've got that same sort of overlap, which just really makes a lot of sense, right? 1 millimeter increase. Boom, boom, boom. So we're at 1.5 hours on this stream. I want to go fly. It's 5:40. I've probably only got about an hour of sunlight. So I'm going to call it there because at this... You fucking motherfucker. I deleted it again. Because at this point, I want to go back and test this. And test these brackets of weight ranges. So I got some more building to do. I got to finish up this ripsqueak so that I have these 1504.5s to test. I can use this other ripsqueak on the 1306s to test, although the 06 of this 1306 is a little bit of a problem because it's going to make up for the 6 millimeters is a little bit much. in my opinion, for a small micromotor. So I don't know. We'll see. Ed K says, "Go fly. Some of us poor bastards have to work." I mean, that's what I'm doing right now, Ed. And when I go fly, that's work too. It's weird to think of it that way, but it legitimately is. Like, and I actually have to force myself to face that fact. Like, for a long time, I still considered FPV to be a hobby, but it's not. It's my career. It's my work. When I go out and fly, like, it's not always super fun anymore. It's work. Private Island says, "No props, never flown, unacceptable, sound emanating from the motors, demonstrably demonstrating a problem that I wanted to figure out before flying, which I did. No props, never flown." Got it. Yeah, Private Island saved himself from... Oh, great, the stream is all fucked up again. Private Island saved himself from maybe getting his hands all chopped up by spinning that thing up without the propellers on it first. That's a big deal. Jason Crabtree says, "The 3040 iFlight would tell you the max for the 1804 because it's heavy, right?" Where are those at? iFlight, which 3040 iFlight? Where's the 3040 iFlight in here? iFlight 3040, 2.5 grams. And you said 1804? Yeah, good call. Very good call. The only problem with that is... Well, the big problem is that the 1804s aren't on anything at the moment. Once they are on something, the only problem with that is going to be that those are Cinewoop props. So they're like the most bullnose propellers ever. And that's going to make them more draggy. But it's probably still a totally fine... That probably won't be a deal breaker. Good call. Good call on that one. Lars, yeah. Remy Tim realized that earlier. Thank God, because I was really getting angry. Last two comments of this stream. DQ says, "Just wanted to thank you for telling me to stay patient with the glide frame. They just restocked, so I grabbed one." Awesome, DQ. There you guys go. If you want a glide frame, they are back in stock. If you don't mind, go to CiottiFPV.com. I do have an affiliate link to FPV Cycle's website now. It's free money, and it helps keep the lights on in this motherfucker, so I can just keep doing this every single day. And Tiago with the last comment, he says, "Check Facebook Messenger if you need the weight of any of those." Thank you, Tiago.
Can I show them the cinnamon roll?
Kristen's going to show you guys the cinnamon roll, and then I'm going to sign off. While she's doing that, I'm going to pick a little bit of flying for you guys. Oh, thank you. This is a cool spot. This is with a weird rig that I was testing, though. So excuse the flight characteristics, but this is a fun spot. Smooth and Groovin' with a $2 super chat. That is the only way to extend the stream. Thanks, Smooth and Groovin'. He says, "Why do I get throttle wobble on blips on 3-inch 3PI prop?" Smooth and Groovin', I'm going to make you a deal. I need a lot more info than that, and that's going to take some time in the chat. I do, one of the things I offer over on Fiverr is troubleshooting for 40 bucks a half an hour. I'm going to give you a session for free, but just through Messenger. Hit me on Instagram or Facebook, pretty much anywhere, at CiottiFPV, and we're going to work together on that to get it figured out. Here's what I want you to tell me, though. Everything you possibly can. Tell me what the rig is, what the frame is, what the batteries are, what the motors are, what the propellers are, and also tell me, like, when this started. Has it always been like this, or did this start after you smashed into a tree or something like that? Hit me with that, and I will get you locked in no time. Sound good? I hope it does, because I'm going to shut this stream down. Here's some random flying with a crazy powerful rig that wasn't behaving all that well. I will see you guys tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. And away we go! Thanks for hanging, people. I will see you tomorrow.
just what you make it. Life shit been amazing, I can't see a way out. I've been stacking face down off canvases I painted. I just spent the rain day on shit I can't afford, but that's the price I pay for the memories I'm making. I've been going places, I've been shaking hands for a chance to really make it. This life is so abrasive, so I almost gave it. All this shit I'm laying, and it's only the foundation. I've been going crazy, just trying to find a way. I was in the basement, trying to turn the page. I was going through the phase, nobody see my face. I was chasing at the paper, been all for the waiters, with everything again, and nothing left to lose. I've been breaking rules, I've been making moves, with everything to prove. Now it's going how I see it through my lens, but it's stuck in my head. I can't seem to get away from it. I went out of my way, I'm trying to feel the again. I've lost somewhere in my head, I've been at it all on my own, holding tight to the patch. I'm somewhere near the edge of wishing we never met. I'm scared of being without you, afraid no one ever know me. I'm at the edge, and I can't get us out of my head yet. Looking like who I'm becoming, it's all I ever wanted. Never like me when you're sober, only like you when I'm lonely. Got me looking in the mirror for the self-diagnosis. Feel like they villainize me for they ever get to know me. They tell me that you need me, the action didn't show it. Knowing that you play the angles, and I'm seeing through your motives. But the weight down on my shoulder, found a way to hold it. I can't keep